Hello, everybody. Mike Donahue here, and Brian May.
Indeed.
Indeed, indeed.
I was
Bri-
listening to the radio just a few minutes ago, driving home to do the podcast, and I heard that I was considering doing a residency in the Sphere in Las Vegas. So I figured somebody should tell me, but
Yeah, yeah. Brian May, the guitarist from Queen. I would go see that. If Queen goes out, I know obviously the lead singer is dead, but if they go out there and they do, I would be interested in that. That'd be kind of fun to go
yeah.
see that.
Yeah, it's interesting because back in the day when it was contemporary, I wasn't a big Queen fan, but really after I saw the movie, I really sort of opened my eyes a little bit to just the level of creativity that was there. So,
Yeah, yeah, they
yeah,
were a great band.
yeah, yeah,
Well, Brian, I'm up in Alaska right now. I'm in the third week of a 3-week tour. Yeah, it's crazy. I was in Nebraska, then Ohio, Michigan, um, Chicago, and now I am up in Prince of Wales Island, which is right off the coast of Ketchikan.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty crazy time up here right now.
I,
I'm doing a retreat,
I
and then
see
I
the
got schools.
flag right there over your shoulder. So,
So what do you got? What is it?
I see now your head's in front of it, right over your left shoulder. I see the Alaska state flag there.
Yep.
So,
Oh, yeah, there it is. Yeah. Yeah, so up here doing schools, and then I get to go home, so I'm excited. So, we wanted to riff a little bit on you sent me a paper, somebody's explanation of what a cult is, and so I thought it was interesting. I read it this morning, I was like, "That's, sounds like my life," and seriously, like, that stuff it bothers me sometimes. I read this stuff now, right? I'm like,
uh,
"Gosh, like, that was my life. I was in a cult."
exactly, exactly. It's funny because I just started by asking. Chat GPT, tell me, everything you can tell me about a cult. And, is this thing a cult? Is that thing a cult? And that led me down the road to doing a bunch of research. And I just compiled like a page of notes, uh, very high level. And I just thought it was interesting. But thought we might talk about that a little bit today, because I think, Mike, if people out there stop for a minute, look around, take a deep breath, and do a little Jeff Foxworthy, I might be in a cult if they're going to come to the same or a similar conclusion that you and I did, right? That
Right.
holy crap, I was in a cult.
Yeah. Yeah, let's go down that list.
Yeah, all right, all right. So let me just say a little bit. There's a guy, his name is, what was his name, I don't know, Stephen Hassan, that a lot of this information comes out. He calls it the bite model, which I think is kind of funny. Um, Cults
Bit me
bite.
in the ass.
Yeah, exactly. It's not scientific. He's not a social scientist. He's actually a former cult member, and this is just his sort of anecdotal observation. So there's not like there's a bunch of PhD type research behind this, but I get it home for me. And it talks about four things: behavioral control, informational control, thought control, and emotional control. And I thought back to some of our podcasts. I thought back to your testimony and my testimony and what a lot of people had said. And it's like, yep, every one of these boxes gets checked.
Oh my gosh,
So
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So you wanna jump right in?
Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's go.
Okay, this is funny, and it's funny, but it's not funny. But I told Mike, the reason I would really like to do this is to maybe give folks out there who are watching this, a checklist to say, maybe I need to ask some questions, maybe I need to look at some things. I mean, back in the day when we were in the midst of it, I might not have looked at, the church leadership and said, yeah, these are very cult like practices. But I think one of the things that really motivates me, Mike, is that I think a lot of these practices are being adopted in churches and they're being adopted because they're being mainstreamed, and they're being mainstreamed because people are succeeding with them and building big churches and creating good revenue streams with these. And so unwittingly, maybe, or at least blindly, I think a lot of people are beginning to mainstream a lot of these practices in the way they lead their churches or lead their ministries.
Right. Right.
So let's just start at the top. Behavioral control. Okay. Um, and I'm just going to give my 2 cents worth. If I were looking for a church, and I'm not, but if I were, I would be looking for people who led by example, who are humble, who didn't say what was important, that they did what was important. That was the key there. And some of the characteristics that kind of bubble up under this are, and just we can talk about any of these individually if you want to, but authoritarian or narcissistic leadership. Hmm.
Check.
Big red check. Uh, Denial of agency. In other words, wanting to make the group behave in a uniform fashion rather than looking at people as individuals who all bring something to the table, right? Crazy rules around dress and music and dating and marriage. And it's funny, Mike, because, I've heard stories on this podcast of people who had their pastors meddle in their decisions on who they're going to marry and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying you don't get advice. I mean, if your daughter drags home a guy that like has a crack pipe in his back pocket, you might want to talk to her a little bit. But, um, we've heard some wild stories there. This one was nice. Mandatory service. And I don't know, Mike, if any of the times that you were under Jeannie or in any of those, there was like, okay, it's mandated that you have to be, I mean, it was different for you because you actually worked there. But there was a practical mandate that you had to be at service on, Sunday morning and Sunday night and Wednesday. And that if you were, really dedicated, you'd go to all the other crap too. Um, Last thing here, I would say control over finances. Real pressure there to ignore the parable of the widow's mite and take advantage of people and basically guilt them into to bringing their cash and dumping it in the offering. One of these days we'll talk about the tithe, and I'll talk about what utter bullshit that is. Oh, I'm sorry, I cussed. But for now, we'll just leave it there. So, any of those scout to you, Mike? Any stories from your? Might be kind of fun to tell some stories from our past that follow some of these categories.
Well, it's kind of interesting because when I first became a Christian, I had bad behavior, right? Like I was out drinking.
You did.
You
I watched you.
Yeah, yeah, I was. I made out with a girl in the church parking lot until 6 in the morning one Sunday morning, and I was so afraid Pastor Mayo was gonna come and, come to pray, God bless him, and, and then, catch me with my hand in the cookie jar, so to speak. Um, that's what we called her. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. Um no, so basically, that was kind of a yeah, I mean, I go back and I go, "Wait, I needed some behavior change," right? And I did, and I liked the accountability as far as helping me, see some of the behavior that I was doing was not good, and I like the accountability of that. But then when I got into leadership, it got more into certain behavior was expected. Like there was no negotiation. Like you didn't listen to secular music.
Right.
You didn't wear shorts that were lower than your knees. You couldn't go to an R-rated movie or even talk about it. I mean, you couldn't even talk about it. Like if you'd seen one before and you started to talk about that movie from, your past, that was deemed as, unholy or whatever. And it got real restrictive. And again, so I wrestled with I needed some of that restriction because of my behavior was a little crazy, but again, when it got to be like very controlling, that's when, that's when it crossed that line, I think.
Yeah. I wish I still had one. but we threw all of that crap out. I wish I'd have saved a couple of things just for the bad memories. But do you remember accountability sheets from
Yeah.
JC Power?
Yes.
Yeah. You have to answer, how much you prayed and how much you read your Bible and how many people witnessed to, how many people came to your small group, all of those kinds of things. And, we've heard even more egregious things that were going on in Atlanta from some of the women who were there in Atlanta, where there would just be this probing behavior into people's, innocuous personal decisions, which is, yeah, it's just really weird and troubling. It's more weird than anything else, I
Right,
think.
and, what the other thing that was really weird about it was that there was spies. There were people that were in that ministry that would turn you in for doing some of that stuff, right? They were spies. I remember one of my friends had went to a wedding and there was dancing. There wasn't even alcohol, it was just dancing, and, oh, man, it was like this thing just got blown up and, it got brought up in JC Power and, it was this big scandalous thing that these kids were dancing,
Yeah.
and, it just was crazy, it's just so weird.
And from our vantage, we look back on those things and say, gosh, that was just weird. But I mean, when you were in the middle of it, it seemed real. And the reason I say that is that somebody out there might be listening to this, you might be in the middle of it. And I want to give you permission, to question those things. Like I remember is when I was teaching at Bellevue Christian High School, we had a speaker come in. I mean, he was a good guy. I liked him a lot, but he got up and started telling the story about music. And he said, man, I really want to be able to listen to Green Grass and High Tides, but I can't. Well, I mean, Green Grass and High Tides is a song by the Outlaws. And it's like, there's nothing in that song that is saying, go kill your neighbor or, go smoke crack or, lust after your neighbor's wife or anything like that. I mean, it's just this innocuous kind of thing. And by the way, Huey Thomason, who plays on that song, is an amazing guitar player. But I thought, even though we were steeped in that culture that if it was secular, it was automatically bad. I mean, it could be Kieran Carpenter, right? But it was just bad. But I can remember sitting there thinking, like, what is really so bad about this? And how is that resonating with these kids?
Well, I
Because it's
remember
so
Oh, go ahead.
bizarre. No, go ahead.
Well, when I remember Amy Grant came out with a secular song or it was secular, and everybody was freaking out because it wasn't born of the Spirit, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what's it I mean, really? You know? But Hillsong can be, doing these Jesus songs and drinking and partying and having sex with each other, but that's okay because it's, they're singing about Jesus. Like, it's just so hypocritical and weird.
Well, I just recently saw an interview with Amy Grant, where she talked about how she really had to redefine her faith because of just all the BS that, you know, came at her in that world because she was a superstar. So before we leave this, I think we really need to talk about this authoritarianism. We've talked about it a lot on this podcast. Um, but Mike, you and I both have these experiences where we served under or with or alongside people. This gives me really bad visions when I say served under Genie, but sorry, folks. This podcast is R-rated. Uh, so don't
There's
tell your pastor you watched it.
so many jokes going through my head right now. So many. I just gotta stop.
So, we had people who would tell us that because they got hired for this job, that they had some special, you know, it wasn't just like, I'm responsible, so I got to call the shots kind of a thing. It was like, I'm anointed by God to be able to tell you to an extent how to live your life and how you are under me, how you are below me, and you really need to respect or follow my leadership or God is unhappy with you. Um, and I think that, Mike, I think that is rampant in a lot of churches. These guys, they go, you know, I'm going to do my diatribe again. They mail off their, mail order Bible certificate to Waxahachie, Texas, and they get a half-ass little deal back in the mail. And all of a sudden they think they're kings.
Right.
And that I can't find that nowhere in the Bible. I can't find Jesus doing that. I don't find the writings of Paul saying to do that. Um, but I think it's rampant, and it's very disturbing because that's what you see with people like Charles Manson, with David Koresh, with Jim Jones. I mean, we could just go down the list.
Yeah. Of all like, they get a title, maybe it's self-imposed title or whatever, but it's the same thing. They get a title, and then all of a sudden, it comes with authority, it comes with some kind of special
Right.
anointing. I remember, like, some of my friends that came up through the ranks with me that were just regular guys, like the Hank Kunnemans and the Kurt Conways and people like that, that Rod Whitlock even became a pastor, but they were guys. They were guys in the youth group, like guys that farted and burped and, and had a life and, lusted and dealt with different things. And all of a sudden they became pastors. It was like they were untouchable. I was like, I don't get that. Like even when I became a pastor and I get my title pastor and I didn't do anything for it. I did the mail-in thing, but honestly, it was like the equivalent of getting your real estate license. I mean, it was like not even I don't even think it was that comprehensive. It was
Yeah.
just really simple, and I didn't understand half the stuff on it, but all of a sudden now, like, I get uncomfortable now when people from my past will say, "Hi, Pastor Mike," or whatever. I'm like, "Don't call me that," 'cause I
Yeah.
I don't like that. I
Yeah,
just
call me dirtbag instead.
call me
Um,
yeah, call me
yeah,
Michael John
I used to
Johnny.
drive those guys crazy, I think, because I would never call them pastor. Oh, Pastor Gary this, or oh, Pastor Sam this. And I mean, as far as I was concerned, I was on a first name basis because,
Yeah.
I just didn't see it. So we'll leave this little piece here. We'll leave the B with this question. So you might be um, in a situation where some of these things ring true, but ask yourself this question. Is your group's leadership authoritarian? Does the pastor have absolute authority? Is he beyond question? Is he set up on a pedestal, or she? It could be a she as well. So, um, but you might be in a cult if that is true. Information control. You mentioned spying before. I thought that was interesting. I think healthy faith allows people to be critical, right? Because if your faith is worse than anything, it'll stand to criticism. But I can't tell you how many times that I was told, hey, well, you might not want to read that, or you might not want to watch that because those people are this and that or the other thing, and it might lead you astray or pull you on a slippery slope. Or the other thing was, and you mentioned it, this sort of spying behavior. I can remember going into Village Inn to sit with Jeannie on a Saturday, and, we've talked about this on the podcast before, but it's worth reiterating. You would get the dirt on the people that came in before you, and you would feel sort of like in the know. And I mean, I only got to believe, Mike, that the people who came in after us got the dirt on us, right?
Yeah. Oh, no doubt. I mean, I know she talked crap about me
Right.
to other people on staff when I was up in Rockford. They told me, so, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And, things like, make sure that, when you're listening to the news, make sure you listen to the right news outlet, right? Because these other news outlets, you know, they're, I don't know, the mouthpiece of the devil, rather than, that kind of a thing. And that kind of gets into the whole political thing, but still it was that kind of thing. And I remember as well, I'm not of this opinion anymore, but, again, you had all these people that had at best a liberal arts Bible college degree, and they would tell you why modern psychology was wrong about everything. And number one, nothing is wrong about everything. All things are wrong about something. Um, but Mike, I know in your work, I mean, there are a lot of there's a lot of truth you derive from that realm, right?
Oh, yeah.
Um, we had Dr. Dina on the show, and I mean, she was able to bring some great insight, into these kinds of situations. But they would tell you that, hey, you can't, you know, matter of fact, I don't even know anyone from those ranks who even got like a psychology degree or anything like that because it was taboo. You weren't allowed to drink from that fountain of knowledge. In the meantime, you were expected to counsel people and give them advice and help them along, right? Uh,
Yeah, we just got an email the other day from somebody who and I wanna be careful, but they were basically saying this former senior pastors at Bellevue Christian Center after the Mayos. Somebody knows who that is, but the senior pastor's wife was counseling their marriage, and it was some of this. If what they said on that email is true, it was bizarre
It was gross.
what she was saying. It was really bizarre, and
Yeah.
um, and I know her. It's Lori Hoyt, and let's just say it. I mean, who knows? I mean, she didn't have any formal education in counseling, but some of the crap that she said, if this is true, was pretty crazy. Like, it wasn't even biblical. It was
Yeah.
just bizarro, and, yeah, I just think, again, they give them a title, they give them an office, they say, "Now you're a pastor, now you get to counsel people," and there was no counseling degree. There was no education.
No.
Um, it was real and but you're in the but you're meddling with things that really matter. You're meddling with somebody's marriage
Yeah.
and some advice, and I know somebody really close to me that Lori actually counseled and that their relationship ended in divorce, and it might have anyways, but some of the stuff she said to her was just outlandish, and I don't know. I just think I you put your foot in that realm of, sensitivity, you really should know what you're talking about. You should really or at least refer them to somebody, and, like, in my business, like, I know my limitations, like, when a kid comes to me and says, "Hey, I've got this," I don't try to tackle any of those things because I'm not qualified,
Yeah.
but I'm a conduit. I can get them where they need to go. I can
Right.
that's what I feel like my job is to put them in front of somebody that knows what they're talking about, but we became authorities, we were the ones that, you know that had the special knowledge, and it wasn't under any accountability. Lori wasn't accountable to anybody. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe to her husband, who also had a make-believe degree from, from Waxahachie or whatever. I think he got his Berean, whatever, so he really didn't know what he was talking about either, and then there was nobody on top of his world because, the district soup didn't really wasn't a counselor or anything. I mean, I don't know where these people get off thinking
Right.
that they can counsel someone psychologically, you know, without a degree, without any kind of education in that. But
Right.
they did a lot of that.
They did, and I'm glad you told that with respect to yourself, because I was going to ask you that, because I know that about you. That, I mean, there's things that you hear probably every day when you speak in a school that you need to think, okay, I this person needs more help than I can give them, and so you go find it and do it. That really is the right thing to do, right?
Yeah. I do
Yeah.
that daily. I mean, that's pretty much I have a debrief on my way out of the school with the counselor and the principal. And they're like,
Yeah.
"Did anybody say anything that we need to be concerned about?" "Yeah," or "No." But usually it's "Yeah." Or I get an email later, which has happened like 4 times this year already,
Right.
where I've had to call the school and go, "I got this email. Here's the email. You know, um, it's in your court now." Now, I will be friendly to that person, and I'll say, "Thank you for sending me the email," and, but I always push them back to a trained psychologist or counselor that's in the school because they're the ones that are gonna work with cutting or, suicide ideation or whatever they're dealing with. Usually, those are the 2 things I need to report or an abuse situation. If somebody's being abused at home, obviously, I have to turn that in, or if somebody's being if they're cutting their skin with something sharp, I need to probably alert somebody, and then obviously, suicide ideation, and again, 4 times so far. This is October. This is mid-October, and already I've had to contact schools 4 or 5 times and let them know what's up. So,
Yeah.
I
And
don't try to tackle that stuff myself.
yeah, and to your point, it's serious stuff, and we shouldn't have. It's unfortunate that in large part in the church, the hubris exists to think that, well, we're anointed by God, so we can handle this. We've got a Bible verse, so we can handle this. And I could talk an hour about the Bible and the lack of understanding there, but I won't, because nobody wants to hear that. It would just be my diatribe. So, I guess we could leave the eye of bite with this question. Are members, um, is it taboo to go to some of these sources for information or to bring them in to your fellowship, to your group? Do people see you opening yourself up to Satan? Let me get Dana Carvey on here, right? Um, because we heard all of that. We just heard all of that BS. So third thing, um, thought control.
T, thought.
T is thought control. So you know, I think most people in the world would think that having a critical mind and being able to think, and being able to arrive at you know conclusions independently is probably a good thing. But we know, Mike, that that's not the case in a lot of the circles we ran with. We had our leaders, as we mentioned before, our leaders had special insight. I mean, you mentioned Hank. If you folks don't know who Hank Kuhneman is, Mike used to live with him. So if you go Google what he's doing right now, you might be a little worried about Mike, but we'll leave that for another day. um,
I was his roommate. I would
yeah,
say he's a big TV evangelist now.
yeah. Well, he's a big TV something, but he's got a coif of hair. That's for damn sure. But some of these folks think they have special insight, right? They've got a very black and white worldview. Things are one way or the other. It's in and out. It's up or down. And man, I would love to live in that world because it would be a whole lot easier to live there than in the gray here, but it'd be boring, I guess. They use loaded language saying, oh, well, that's worldly knowledge, or that's demonic knowledge, or that's being unspiritual. They see your questions as, attacking the faith or doubting. And I mean, I could talk for an hour about doubt and how they make doubt seem like you've just, sprouted demons coming out of your ears or something if you have doubts. But just this whole area of thought control, you were taught there was really a group think where we came from, wasn't there, Mike?
Yeah. Oh, for real. I mean, you knew the rules. It's that thing I talk about in schools where it's the social norms, right? There's social thought. There's a
Right.
normal social thought in that world where you have to think a certain way, and you can't dare, like, you got to be careful who you express your thought to. Although they tell you, to be open, be honest, to be real.
Right.
Okay. And then, but if you are, then the thought police are going to come get you because, you can't be thinking about certain things, and it's not even lewd and crude. It's more like questioning authority or questioning a certain, theological stand they have, or, I mean, like we got pushback from our podcast we did on Barabbas, and they still want Barabbas, because, oh, how dare you think, like that, and there's a social norm, there's a set of rules, there's a set of thoughts that you must have, and you can't deviate from that. And
Right.
especially when I was with Jeannie up in Rockford, it what was interesting about Rockford was I came out of Bellevue, which was very thought controlled. I mean, very much, because I got there about probably 7 years after she started there, maybe 5 or 6 years, something like that. And then I was there for another 5 years. So that place was pretty locked down when it came to thought. Rockford was different because even though it was a Christian church and, school and everything, they were very much not like that yet. They didn't have Jeannie's, set of rules yet. They had, standard Christian rules that everybody has, but pretty much it was open. And then when she got there, she couldn't be like, she couldn't lay down those rules right away. So it's interesting watching what happened because she was very liberal when she first got there about certain things. And then little by little, she started turning up the heat. And how she did that was the main leaders, the people that drove the culture, had to think a certain way, or at least they had to front like they thought a certain way, and
Right.
she put them up front, right? She put them in positions of leadership, in positions of influence, because then that would spread it out, and then systematically, you got rid of the people that were thinking different, and I can name them because I remember watching some really good people get shown the door because they weren't thinking the way we was thinking,
Yeah.
and I remember being confused about that because, again, she had open arms when we first got there to those people, And then when they weren't gonna, submit to this new way of thinking, she showed them the door pretty quickly, and we were told to not have anything to do with them, and then there was some made up shit, like, made up sin in their life that I didn't know was made up at the time, now I do, but it was made up, so because you couldn't say, "Hey, you can't be a part of us anymore because you don't think the way we think," because that'd be weird, right? You can't say it like that, you have to say, "Well, I found out that, they lust," or, "We caught them doing blah, blah, blah," or, "There's some kinda sin pattern in their life that we exposed. They have homosexual thoughts," or, there's things like that, that there's rumors that got spread that were in the system or in that culture, sinful, so we were automatically told, "Hey, we need to ostracize them." And that's how she got rid of everybody that didn't think the way she thought.
Yeah. And again, I think that's become normalized that if you are going to, if you're a person who is in the church to have a position or have influence in that, you know, maybe that's your weakness, maybe that means too much to you. That's the way they're gonna get you there. You're gonna get this litmus test is like, okay, are you gonna think the party line or are you gonna do things differently? I know for Cheryl and I, when we began to do our deconstruction, um, mine was very theologically based. I started reading, theologians from other streams. I mean, guys like with real degrees, not like Gary Hoyt with a master's degree in leadership from Hinky Dinky High, whatever the hell a master's degree in leadership is. I mean, these were guys who had PhDs and had studied language and culture and all of those kinds of things. And um, you know, and not to say you have to have that, but I mean, this stuff is very difficult, and there's a lot of aspects to it. Anyway, I started to read and started to change my mind about some of those things, and I won't talk about them now because we're not really about talking about theology here. But you got ostracized for that. You got pushed out. Your orbit. You became not to be trusted. Matter of fact, I can remember getting a call from him or an email. I can't remember if it was a call or an email, invitation to coffee. And the line was, well, we need to talk because I'm not sure we can do ministry together anymore. And I mean, it was like, what are you talking about, man? I'm not talking that, Jesus really had three heads and, um, you know, lived underwater and, uh, anything bizarre. I mean, I was talking about things that were well inside the Christian canon from, from early on. Of course, if you didn't read or look at those things, you would know it. But there's that ostracism. So, I know we're running short on time, so let me leave a question with a question here. And I think we outlined it pretty good. But in your situation, if you were trying to evaluate what your situation is like, are there consequences, explicit or implicit, for questioning your leaders? Can your leaders stand up to questioning, and can they live with the fact that you don't agree with them? You know,
Yeah.
um, the last one is probably the most egregious one. So we've hit BIT. The last one really bites and puts the emphasis on it, and that is emotional control. And I think that probably is the one theme that we have seen throughout all of the testimonies on this podcast. It was a gigantic theme in your book. Um, it is everyone, I think, to a person that we've interviewed on this podcast talks about the emotional control, the love bombing, or the rejection when you didn't suck up, or the fear of, well, if I don't live just this right way, then something terrible is going to happen to me. All of those kinds of things, the use of guilt and shame to get people to do things that they wouldn't normally do. Um, that has been just a constant theme here. And if there's anything on this list of characteristics of, you might be in a cult if, this is the one I think that enrages me the most, Mike. How about you?
Oh, 100%. That's why I wrote the book, because that's what happened to me. The vulnerability that I had when I was in Boston was preyed upon by pedophiles and sick people, and only to be replaced by the church. And it was the more I'm unpacking Jeannie and what was really going on in her life in the '80s when I showed up there, she was really not much different than any of those guys that
Yeah.
had, you know, at least with me, it wasn't sexual at all. I mean, as far as like her seducing me, I mean, I don't know if she was laying down any kind of hints, I never took them because I wasn't attracted to her at all. So it wasn't like that was going to happen.
It's one of the
But
reasons I love you, Mike.
what's that?
That's one of the reasons I love you.
I mean, I'm not trying to put anybody down that did get, sucked into that world, so, no
Uh,
pun intended, but I think that bottom line is, that's why I get so emotional about it. I get fired up about it because and it's probably and it is, it's not probably, it's the reason I do what I do in schools. I'm right now in a school in Alaska.
yeah,
Right outside these doors is about 30 kids that are going through basically a class that I'm just here observing, and my stuff I'm gonna do up here is next week, speaking in the schools, but I come up early to be a part of this thing. I was there last night, and they're being trained on how not to be vulnerable, basically. They're being trained on self-agency and having the right self-worth so they won't be vulnerable to bad people. And I wish I had had that training because I probably would have saw through Jeannie faster, but that all that love bombing and using emotion to suck me into that world and then get me to do things. It's that bait and switch. I mean, I'm not opposed to people loving people, obviously, but when it comes with conditions, that's not real love. It's not. It's not love. If it comes with guilt and condemnation for not doing the things you want me to do, that's not love. It's not. I mean, it's not. So, like
yeah,
that to me is that's what exposes her is and what's been exposing her since we started doing this was all these people coming forward saying, she said this and then changed the rules in the middle of the game,
right,
and that's a cult.
right, right. And what 100%. She probably is she could teach a master class in that to all the famous cult leaders we could name right here. And I think one of the places I got started to get in trouble is that with the whole guilt and shame kind of a thing. Because I mean, again, I'm not a psychologist, but think about this: if you are in an environment where guilt and shame, guilting and shaming are prevalent, then you're always going to get the message that you're not good enough, right?
Right.
And it's everybody wants to be good enough, right? You don't want to be not good enough. I've never met a person in my life that's said to me, you know what, I'm really happy being not good enough. This is a really good place for me. That's my aspiration in life, right? We want to be good enough. And so that every human being at some level is vulnerable to that. And I really got in trouble because I began to see that and I don't mean this so much in a theological construct. I'm saying that they used scripture like a club because they painted an image of a God that if you were in line, things were all good with you. But the minute you step out of line, Katie bar the door, look out, man. You're stepping out and you know, you might get a lightning bolt from heaven or an arrow from hell or something like that. And um, what they did is they poisoned their faith with a really, I don't want to offend anybody, a really crappy image of maybe what divine love was supposed to be. But that keeps people in bondage, and they're afraid then to question. They're afraid to go with their instinct. They're afraid to say, "Hey, you know what? This doesn't seem right to me. Maybe I should be doing something different."
Yeah. It's a lot harder to love the right way. If you're gonna
Yeah,
love the right way, it's selfless. And you're not gonna gain anything from it.
yeah.
You're not supposed to. I mean, I think you do, but you shouldn't be intentional about it. I mean, I gain a lot from loving people because I get a sense of I'm I'm in the flow of God and I'm doing what God wants me to do, what I'm born to do, right? Um, and so I'm not more valuable because 'cause I'm doing it. I'm valuable anyways. But I always use the analogy of a race car in the Denny's parking lot. I went to Florida one time and Jimmy Johnson's car was in there, and the whole idea that that car is worth $300,000 worth of sitting in the Denny's parking lot, or was sitting on the or it's going around the racetrack. Obviously, it's happier around the racetrack. I'm happier
Yeah,
doing what I'm supposed to do, but I'm not more valuable.
yeah,
I'm valuable anyways. And the church goes, "No, get on the racetrack. Get on the racetrack. Get on the racetrack. Get on the racetrack." Because, when you go on the racetrack, you're gonna make me money. You're gonna make me, my ministry is gonna get bigger. If you're not on the racetrack, you're out in the Denny's parking lot, well, then you're not worth anything to me. And that's
right,
not God's heart. That's not God's heart. God's heart
right.
is you are worth what you're worth. I died for you at your worst moment. Your worst moment. That's when I died for you. So what else, so if you do well now, great, but that's
Yeah,
not, that's for you. That's for you. You get to be happy around going around the racetrack. I'm happy living my life the way I live it because I get to do what I think I'm called to do, and it feels great, but I'm not any more valuable,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. And I
I'm
love.
Ryan, when I was down and out, when I got a divorce and I thought my life was over, I'm gonna start crying. That's when God showed me, and I'd been in big stages.
Yeah,
I'd been on the news. I'd sat with governors and senators, and I remember being at my lowest point and God saying, "No, man, I love you now, Mike. I love you now. I
yeah,
love you now."
yeah, yeah. And so, and
That's why
and
I love
I
him. That's why
technology
I
the
love
radar, and I love your I love your testimony in that respect. And so I guess I would say to people out there that are maybe wanting to evaluate their situation, saying, "Hey, maybe I need to get out of here." Ask yourself: do you feel like is there fear or guilt or emotional manipulation, things that make you feel like you're not good enough just the way you are? If you feel like you've got to do X, Y, and Z, to achieve favor, and if you're not doing that, then somehow you're flawed. Get out of there. And that's what I want to say at the end of this right now, Mike, is that we've been kind of telling stories and been a little cavalier here, but I really think this is, and we've covered a lot of ground that we've covered before, but I just want to encourage people. And I mean, I might get a little passionate about this, but if you are in a church situation and any of these things are there, confront your leadership, go to them, see how they act. And if you are received and they said, yeah, let's sit down and talk about that because that's not really the way they want to be, then have that conversation and help them be better. Help them be better um, at doing what they feel like they're trying to do. But if they push back on you, if they try to act like you're whatever, you're a tool of the devil, coming to attack, or you're deceived, or you're rebellious, or you're sinful, then you know what? Uh, this part's optional. Give them the finger and then get out of there. Just get out of there because, Mike, I am sick and tired of looking around. I mean, I look back, I can easily, for years, I could have easily identified Jeannie Mayo as a cult leader. I probably wouldn't have identified her successor, Gary Hoyt, as a cult leader right away. And maybe I don't today, but I will say that he learned and his regime learned a lot of cult tactics that they normalized and they employed in their day-to-day their day-to-day way they operated. And whether they're aware of it or not, that's real and that's there and it's damaging and it hurts people. And so we've talked about this before, you and I, that really the biggest thing that we can vote with to change all of this crap that's out there is our pocketbook and our feet. And if you look around and you're in a church situation like that, I know there's a lot of reasons to stay in a church. I stayed in a church I shouldn't have for 30 years because we had a lot of relationships there. But you know what? I wish I would have left sooner.
Yeah,
I really wish I would have left sooner because all of these things were there and it wasn't good for me and it wasn't good for your family. And I want to challenge anyone. I don't like using that word, but I want to encourage anyone watching this podcast, look at your situation, evaluate it critically, and say, look, is this damaging me? Is this damaging my family? Are these healthy relationships? Or do I maybe need to think about doing something different? Because that's the only way this situation that I think is an epidemic in the church in this country today is going to change. There, I'm done with
100%.
my duck job.
Yep, 100%. Yep.
So,
Brian, you should start a podcast. Oh, wait a minute. Brian, we've been doing this for a year and a half now.
yeah,
You
we
know that?
have. We
Yeah.
have. We
We hit
have.
and guys, we've been hitting a lot of the same stuff. I think part of it is we keep hearing the
Right.
same stuff. You know, if you could take this stuff out with one punch, we probably would have done it a long time ago, but you gotta hit this stuff and hit it and hit it and hit it because people are still falling victim, and the emotional part of that, it really bothers me because that's why a lot of people stay too long. It's the emotional part. They get
Right.
connected to the pastor, they get connected to the families, they get connected to people in their church, and, you know, it's hard to separate. When you pull apart from a church,
Yeah.
it's traumatic. It's because it's your
Yeah.
family, you know, in a lot of ways. I talk about in schools, your school being like your second family. So if you don't have a good family at home and your first family, and you go to church or you go to, you know, your school, but you go to church and your church becomes your second that's what Rick Warner was like my big brother. So
Yeah.
separating from him was hard. It was like seeing how he really was and that, you know, is basically a bunch of manipulation. That
Yeah.
was tough for me, and it was I lied to myself for a while. I remember lying to myself going, "No, no," you know, when I went to Europe with him and I went to Asia with him, and he basically tried to rip me off, or he did rip me off, like, thousands of dollars, you know, claiming, you know, "You're my son in the Lord," and all this crap. I remember, like, lying to myself, like, going, "No, he's really, you know, he really means it," or whatever, and it was all a bunch of bullshit, and but but coming to that conclusion was hard for me because I did care about him, you know,
Yeah.
but, you know,
Yeah.
again, just another another pawn, he's just another player
Yeah.
in that game, and so
Yeah.
it's too
Well,
bad.
and Cheryl and I were talking about this today. You know, we realize that a lot of our true friends, I mean, we do, I want to say that we do have. So if you are my friend still today, I'm not talking about you, but there are a lot of faux friends we had in that world, right? Because as soon as you walked away or as soon as you know, took a right when everybody was taking a left, I mean, you were, you might as well have been invisible, right? You didn't exist.
Yeah,
Those aren't real friendships. Those aren't real relationships. They don't stand the test.
right.
And so what I'm beginning to realize is I was hanging on to something that wasn't even real, just exactly what you're saying. There's that emotional attachment. So,
You know,
um,
and I wanna give a shout out to some people that probably still believe a lot of the same church things, but stayed my friend, like Kelly Goins is AG up the butt. I mean, I think he's got the 16, like, the fundamental truths tattooed to his leg or something. Anyway, but I'm kidding, Kelly. But he actually was a true friend.
yeah,
Like Jeff Baker, I've mentioned him a million times, still in the
right,
AG. Like Matt Larson down in Florida. Like they're good, like,
yeah,
I would consider them like Jesus, like, they're in that system, they're in that world, but their love for me and their love for people circumvents their rules, and that's where it didn't happen for Jeannie, it didn't happen for Rick or Gary. It was like those rules were just solid. You couldn't be their friend unless you saw it their way, and it wasn't that way with Kelly, and it wasn't that way with Jeff, and it wasn't that way with Matt. There's
yeah,
probably others I'm leaving out, but, like, that's great to me. The late Barry Polzer, he was a really good friend of mine and very instrumental in my life and very dogmatic about his faith, but they his love for me circumvented the rules. Like, I love that. Like, that and to me, that's Jesus. Like, that's the rules are not for the people. I mean, the people aren't for the rules are for the people. Like,
right,
this you know what I mean? Like they serve the people. It's about people. It's not about the rules. But these guys made it about the rules, and okay,
Yeah.
you're stupid.
Yes.
And
Well,
you don't have real friends, and
stupid.
they don't have real friends. Like, they really don't. That's what makes me sad. Those Rick Warren doesn't have real friends, he has ministry friends.
Yeah.
So does Gary. He has ministry friends.
Yeah.
They're just friends that do that. They're in that bubble. They're in that really, like, restrictive bubble, and I'm just so lucky and so blessed that I have friends that are from all I got liberal friends, I got conservative friends, I got you, you're a pain in the ass, but, I mean, I'm just kidding. No, but in case in point, Brian, you and I are a lot different, but
Yeah.
we but
Sure.
we like, you love the way you're supposed to. You care the way you're supposed to, not because it's here's the set of rules, go by these, and if it doesn't work, then we're out, I just that's so phony and so shallow, and
It
I don't want any part of that anymore.
Yeah. No, it's a cold, hard, dead religious system, and um, I hope that even again, though we're reiterating a lot of things we say, I hope that they get heard and they really help people navigate their way. And I mean, we don't want to tell anybody what to do, but I do want to encourage people to think about some things and ask the questions that they need to ask. And and if what they're in is working for them, if it's holding their family together, and I'll be the last person to say that's bad. But I mean, if you look at it and you can see how it's being detrimental to you, and maybe you didn't see it that way before, then don't let them keep you captive. You're not chained. You're not obligated.
Yeah,
They're not gods. They're not special people. They're not little gods. They're not, they don't somehow have a red phone to heaven, where you don't.
right.
You don't need people like that in your life. You just you,
100%,
you just don't. You don't need people like that in your life.
100%.
So
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody. We've had a great time this week chatting it up. As you can tell, I'm probably pretty tired. I've been going, going, going. Brian,
nice.
I figured this out. I've been in a school every day since the middle of August. It's been nuts. And I keep booking more stuff, so I don't know what's happening, but the need is great, and so we're in schools, and I get home for a couple of days, but then I'm back out again, and I'm looking forward to the Christmas break so I can have some sleep, but, a lot of good things happening, a lot of really cool things happening. We're not supposed to do religious stuff in schools, but, I mean, it's just so obvious that God is in some of this stuff. I mean, maybe on another podcast, I'll get into more details, but it's been a great year, talking to kids about their value. We've been giving books away. I just ordered 3,000 more books, and we're just giving them away because kids are reading them and they're getting stuff out of it, and so I'm excited about what's happening, but, yeah, so thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Brian and I will be back. I'm still up in Alaska next week, I think, but when we record, but hopefully we'll be back in Nebraska. Go Big Red. Go Big Red.
We'll figure it out.
All right.
All right. See
See,
y'all.
see you, Brian.